Excellent. And I'm going to share my screen. Blah, 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 blah. So you probably looked through the brochure and you probably had a look at all the different things, and you noticed that the title of mine was Uber Messy. That was on purpose. That was on purpose.
Yes.
It's not accessible at all. It is a real mess. And as a professional presenter, I'm looking for a job at the moment. I'm job hunting. So I had to get my resume in order. And I was having a look through just how many presentations, workshops, keynotes, plenaries, whatever that I've done. And it's almost 200. So I think it's safe to say I'm pretty well experienced in presenting, leading workshops, etc. But that's just about 200 that I've delivered. The ones that I've actually saw, and I was trying to work this out, it's probably more than 1,000. And lots of the slideshows were terrible. And I don't mean that in terms of the content, because for people to present, they need to have good knowledge, good information, good content. And most of them do, or they wouldn't be presenting. The bigger issue is the presentation, the delivery, the way of getting that information to people. So, you know, imagine you go to a restaurant. It doesn't matter that you're eating amazing Kobe beef steak and really beautiful French potatoes with an Italian red. If it's all just thrown together on the plate, you know, it doesn't look as appetizing as it would as if it was designed properly. So looking at that way, I wanted to examine how people design some of the slideshows. And as teachers, it's not just slideshows. We have handouts, brochures, etc. So just out of interest, I put in bad PowerPoint slides to see what kind of things come up. And in so many ways, these are absolutely terrible. I can't even read that one. And I've seen lots of these kind of things live by presenters, you know, at real events. And it's not only design-wise that they look bad, they actually affect how much of the presentation that, you know, people can remember. Those of you who were here earlier on for Vivian's keynote, she mentioned a book called Brain Rules by John Medina. It's an amazing book about how our brains process information, how we learn things, and so on. And we want the things that we're showing people in our brochures, in our handouts, in our presentations to go in as smoothly as possible. And that means we need to take care of the design for how we do this, because there's a number of things, mistakes that we can make that cause that information not to go in as smoothly as possible to the audience. So in terms of slideshow design, there are a ton of different good books out there. One of the more famous ones would be Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds. He's got a website, a video, a pile of books, all looking at different design elements. Nancy Duarte, I don't know if those of you who are aware of her, she runs a design agency. She coaches people how to do better presentations. She's given some really good TED Talks on this. She's got a pile of good stuff. And on my own YouTube channel for my students to enable me to do flipped learning, I actually made a shelf called Presentation Skills and Theory. And I made a pile of really short videos with some colleagues. Some of them I made alone. I'll just play you this one because it's short. So you get the idea. Notice that when I was playing that video, I shut up, which is the first, because we don't want to bring in two-channel interference. Generally, audiences can't listen and read at the same time. So if you're giving them a video to watch that's got text on it, or giving them a slideshow to look at it with text on it, you can't really be speaking at the same time unless you design a special kind of slideshow called a PSE style slide, a Picture Superiority Effect slide, whereby there's so few words on the slide and it's visual because people remember images rather than text, that the audience can fully understand that slide in less than 5 seconds. Then they switch their attention to the speaker. You can't read a book and watch a movie at the same time. You can read a bit of the book, put it down, and then start watching a video. That works. So we don't want to give them things and two things at the same time. So a lot of squeaking going on in the background. My dog has found her squeaky toy. So if you hear squeaking, that's what's going on. So I've got a number of videos on here, you know, explaining how to do that. So in my classes, I can teach this a la flipped learning. And we do spend a lot of time showing them how to design really good slideshows, etc., etc., etc. But that's only half the battle. Knowing how to design a good slideshow, reducing the number of words on your slide, that's all great. I've got the videos there to show them this. But there are some other things, and that's accessibility. Now, if you look at the screen, there's a bit.ly shortened link here, and I'm going to stick this in the chat, so you don't really need to take any notes, simply because I've just stuck the link in the chat. That's the link to this document in front of you. So everything that I'm going to link to from this document, you've got a copy of it via the link I've just put in the chat. And you can see it here. It's bit.ly customized and shortened. So in terms of accessibility then, the text that we do put on our slides, and indeed on our handouts, brochures, any other materials that we make, we need to take care of dyslexic people. Because 10% of people are dyslexic to some extent. That's a large part of your audience for a presentation, your readership of a brochure or a handout, that you could be alienating if you're not designing it with them in mind. So some of the things that dyslexic people find really problematic is underlining. That causes them real problems. So if you look at the brochure here, even hyperlinks, there is absolutely nothing underlined in this brochure because I made it. And I made sure there was no underlining going on there. Other things dyslexics find difficult, italics. So again, the brochure that I made for this conference, the slideshows that I put together, I don't use italics. Serif fonts. Things like Times New Roman, etc. Dyslexics have real problems reading them. Yet most academics and most academic journals still use Times New Roman, which is like super heavy on the fonts. Now, does anybody know why the font Times New Roman was actually developed in the first place? A long time ago, the Times newspaper wanted to save money, so they commissioned a font to be made that would enable them to squeeze more words onto the page so their paper tech costs would go down. And that's great for the environment. It's great for, you know, saving paper. But, you know, this is the digital age. We don't even need paper. We can have things on digital handouts, online brochures, and there's no longer a need to squeeze them together. Single spacing, serif fonts. We don't need that. So we can go for sans serif fonts, which are much more readable. They don't have the serifs. And that makes it much more accessible to dyslexic people. Oh, wrong one. To dyslexic people. They also don't like all caps. So again, looking through the brochure that I made, there's very few things, super headers, and that's about it. Beyond that, there's very little in all caps, because that's not good for dyslexic people. Now, there's another issue with all caps. If you're giving people something to read, you want them to be able to read it as fast as possible and then switch their attention back to you. So if we look at the things that we read every day, unless you're Greek or Russian, everybody else has much more experience in reading books, newspapers, comics, articles that are not written in all caps. So the thing that you're more experienced in reading, you've got a faster reading speed. With the exception of, Russians and Greeks, because they have their own Cyrillic alphabet, whatever, that's more likely to be written in all caps. For everybody else, our reading speed of normal versus all caps is faster. So again, if you want people to get through the material in a faster way, don't use all caps. And also it's better for dyslexics not to use all caps. Also, line spacing. You want to have at least 1.5 to make it easier for them, and don't use double negatives. So if you want more details on this, I've put a link in here to the British Dyslexia Association style guide. And that gives a whole load more than what I've just explained about, making things accessible to all. We want to make it as accessible as possible. And it doesn't take much, it just takes a little bit of thinking. More line spacing, no italics, all of the things that we've covered, and it makes your materials so much better. Now, the second thing to consider is colorblind individuals, and you're listening to one now. 10% of men are colorblind, although for women it's much rarer. It's like 1 in 10,000 for women, it's 1 in 10 for men. So let me show you some examples here. Let me just pull this up. Still loading. Come on. Okay, can you guys see these two photos of the world? They're different, yeah? No, they're not. For me, both of those are exactly the same. There's no difference between them. Because I'm red-green colorblind, which is the most common red-green colorblind. So that photo there and the one in the middle, there's no difference between those two for me, none whatsoever. Now, the one on the right is very different for me because I'm not blue-yellow colorblind. But for people who are blue-yellow, the one on the right and the one on the left would look exactly the same. Ditto here. And now, looking down here, can you all see the number on the one on the left? What number can you all see on the one on the left? You're all on drugs. There's no number there. I can't see any number. How about the one on the right? Yeah, I don't see one on the right either. For me, they're both exactly the same. So if you choose the wrong color combination for your handouts, your worksheets, your slideshows, there's a good chance 10% of the males in your audience won't be able to see whatever it is you're writing. So how can we check? There's a colorblind test here. It used to be you had to buy this book that had all these pages in color. And, you had to pay a load of money for it. It was a Japanese guy who owned the copyright. Now the copyright's expired. You can do it online. That's a 7. It's easy for me to see. That's a 9, easy. A 4, easy. Not so easy, maybe an 8. Don't see anything there whatsoever. Don't see anything there whatsoever. That's a 4. Don't see anything there. That's a 9. I think that's a 2. I think that's a 2 again. That's definitely a 2. I think that might be a 4. Possibly a 5. 1 maybe. Don't see anything there. That's a 1. That's a 4. I think that could be a 7. Absolutely nothing there. Maybe a 7. That's a 9. Nothing is there. Maybe a 3. Nothing is there. Maybe a 5. Nothing is there. Possibly a 3. That's a 1. Maybe a 7. Don't really see anything there. 2 maybe. Nothing. 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 6 maybe. Red, green. No surprise. Now, if you try that test, you're probably going to get perfect color vision. Most of you are female in this call. It's very rare for you, but you can see then that that has a major effect. So how can you check the things that you're actually using, you're making, you're creating are okay? Well, if we go to this link, Snook. This is a really useful tool. Background color, foreground color, and we can use these to check. So if we go to a slideshow, for example, let me just add a new slide. Okay, so I got a slide here. Let's go to the background. Maybe I want to choose a custom color. Oh, hold on. Custom, I don't know, maybe whatever this is, yeah? Okay. So I'm going to copy that custom color. Okay. Oh, didn't go in. Hold on, we'll try that again. Custom color. Okay, how about that? Let's see if that's going to work. Okay, done. So there's my background color. So because the background color is there, I would go into Snook and I would paste it in there. Come on, that's not changing. And ordinarily that would change. Don't know why it's not. Let's just go back in here. Background. Custom. Done. Yeah, okay. That should hopefully work. And then I go in for my text box. Type in some text. Let's make it bigger and bold. Bold. And let's go into the text color. Again, custom color. Now we choose something else. Maybe that. Okay. Go back into Snook. Put in the text color. And that's telling us that's one's still not right. I don't know why that's not coming up properly. Over here, if the number is higher than 125, it's good for brightness for colorblind people. If it's over 500, it's good for the color distance. And that's saying yes, no, yes, no. Now there's a problem here because that background color is not going in properly. Now let me change that and try something else. Okay. Let's try that. Let's see if that's going to copy. For whatever reason, that's not loading properly. Let's try. Oh, it's came up now. Yeah, okay, good. So we can see this color of text and this color of background looks like this. That's less than 125. That's less than 500. That's a no, a no, a no, a no, a no. That would be a bad combination for colorblind people. Now, we could just play around with it, but if we move these sliders, we can see it's getting worse, not better. So now we're there. Yes, 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 yes. This is a good color partnership for text, background, and foreground. That would be good. So we would copy these for our background. Okay. And for the foreground, we would need this. Copy. Go in here. And now we've got something that's perfectly accessible for colorblind people because we've checked it here, and this is telling us that it's good for colorblind people. So these tools are there. The only problem is the vast majority of people don't know these tools are there and don't know that they need to know that these tools are there, because as poor, maligned, colorblind men, nobody thinks about us. But I mean, 10% of the male population, that really puts us in a minority. We should be considered. Please let us read your slides and brochures, etc. Now, if you are going to make slides and brochures, there's an amazing app called Canva. Has anyone used Canva before? An amazing tool. You can choose whatever you want to work on. The templates are here, whatever you choose one. These templates are made by professional designers, and initially they're almost all colorblind compatible because they're made by professional designers. The problem is people then go in and change things. Well, I don't like that color. I'm going to change it to this color. And now all of a sudden I can't read that. Because maybe some of you can't either. Because, hey, baby. So people keep messing around with these. So be very careful that the way that they're set originally is good for colorblind people. It's when you start messing around with it, you get into issues. Now, the one problem with Canva is these designers, they're very good designers. They're good with colors, etc. They're not always good at understanding the needs of dyslexic people. For example, just looking here, there's loads of the text on this is in all caps. Some of the text box here is in single spacing, all of which are not good for colorblind, or not good for dyslexic people. So you have to tinker around with some of the templates. So I teach a class at university. It's called technical writing. And these are some of the aspects that we cover in my technical writing class. And I asked my students to make a variety of materials, brochures, infographics, articles, wherever. And they then make a Google website to host these articles on the website. And the theme of the class is, imagine if they were teaching people what I've taught them. They have to create a bundle of materials to show people what they've learned. So here's one of my students' websites, and we can see all the colors are very good for colorblind people. All the fonts are sans serif fonts. There's no underlining, no all caps, no italics, wherever. And they've got bio statements, photos. They learn how to make infographics. What is an infographic? Why we use them, when we use them. Here's an infographic for accessibility. Don't underline, don't use italics, don't use serifs, don't use all caps, etc., etc. Here's a brochure. What are they for? When do we use those? This is a brochure to show some of the design tools. This one was made using Canva, and you can see it follows good accessibility guidelines. Here's an article she wrote. When do we use articles? What are they for? Again, made in Canva, fully accessible, friendly, blah, 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 blah. Slideshows, 2 different types of slideshow. The first one's being the PSE style slides, where every single slide is made so that people can understand it in less than 5 seconds. And then the attention switches back to the presenter very quickly. That's great for live presenting. But what do you do if someone misses your presentation and they say, hey, can you share your slides with me? Well, these are obviously pointless. They're designed to help a live presenter. That's when we make a second type of slideshow called a slidument, which is much more text heavy. This is the kind of slide you would give to people when they've missed your presentation. It's a lot more text heavy. They can understand it from the slides because you're not there to present it. But again, it should follow accessibility guidelines, colorblind guidelines, etc. And again, if you go into Canva and we choose presentation, Canva has some really, really good ones in here. For example, this, and you can see it's got 11 pages. I can add a new page. We can add like this. They're very nicely designed with colors. This one particularly, it's all sans serif. There's very little in all caps that need to be changed. And they can make very good slideument ones in here. So these are really important things that unfortunately don't get the full consideration they should. What if you're on a website and you want to copy the color picker here? This is a Google Chrome add-on that allows you to take droppers of colors and sample that color and put it in your own document. Colorzilla is worthwhile adding to the tools on your Google Chrome browser. The one thing that we haven't covered that's not quite part of this, but you really should be aware of, is how to find copyright-free public domain type images. So there's a couple of links in here to very, very, very good teacher-made blog articles showing you how to get students using Creative Commons properly. And the very last link I'm going to put in here is the Harvard Law School's library page, explaining the legal differences between public domain, Creative Commons, and copyright. And there's links in here to places where you can find public domain images, Creative Commons images, public domain audio, Creative Commons audio, etc., etc. So all these links are in this document for you to go through. These slides that my students made for the technical writing course, there's some examples of their work here. And then at the bottom, these are websites that some of my students made for my business courses and some of my other courses. And again, if we look at what they've made, everything on their website follows these accessibility guidelines, Creative Commons guidelines, etc., etc., etc. All good models of accessibility. But when you look at most conference presentations, they just don't do this. The first thing I look for is, do they have bullet points? I go, Do they have more than 5 or 6 words of text per slide? My brain goes, Do they have slides with no images? That means not good for memory retention. My brain goes, Do they have serifs or any of these other things? And I just think they might know the content that they're delivering, but they don't know the most efficient and effective way to deliver it to that audience. So these are the real things that people should, but usually don't pay attention to. Oh, that's the wrong page. This one here. And I've got about a minute or so left. If anyone's got any last questions, I managed to get through all the things I wanted to get through. Question time. Well, actually, we've probably got a little bit more because the only one to go next, I think, is Charlie. So as long as we're back in the main room. Fiona, by the way.
Right. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. There's a rumor that I've heard since I was in uni, when I was still a student, that on one PowerPoint slide, we shouldn't have more than 19 words. Is that?
No, that's about 14 too many.
14?
Yeah, 14 words too many. I mean, you don't want to have more than 5 or 6 words. On your slide, you don't want to have sentences. Sentences should come out your mouth. You're the presenter, you're there to talk to people. What you're looking for in a good PSE slide is 2 things. You're looking for a key phrase, not a sentence, not a paragraph, not a list, a key phrase or word. And you're looking for an image that matches that phrase or word, because people remember images, not words. So if I tell you, I want you to remember the word car, you don't remember C-A-R. In your brain, you create an image of a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or something. We remember images, and that takes time. So if you can put the image for them on the slide, you're short-circuiting and speeding up the memory process. If you're reducing the number of words, cars are dangerous, and you've got a photo of a car crash, they can process that slide very quickly, be finished with it, and switch their attention to you. If you give them 19 words, they're going to be reading these words, which takes time, and your speaking is going to disturb their words, because you can't read a book when I'm talking to you. Oh, you can't read lots of words on a slide when the presenter is speaking. So good presenters will put the minimum number of words, 5 or 6 max, and when they click to a new slide, they'll pause for 2 or 3 seconds to give the audience time to cognitively process the slide and then start talking.
Mm. And just out of curiosity, I just want to know if you know of any guides that that discuss about how to design materials or PowerPoint slides for visually impaired individuals.
For visually impaired people, you're going to need to make it auditory. So, I mean, you can have like text to speech type. I mean, it depends. Are you presenting live, or are you giving a slideshow to someone who online maybe, and you're not going to be there? So, for example, Twitter has got a thing where you can type in descriptions of the photos for the multimedia in your tweets. You could probably do something like that for slides. But if you're actually presenting live, you could just tell people, okay, everybody, can you see the photo of the car crash? And you could describe it using your words, like that.
Right, that's very useful. Thank you. Because I have students who are visually impaired and somehow I'm caught, like, what should I do? Especially on this Zoom environment. It's especially difficult for them.
Yeah. When I used to teach, I had taught 1 or 2 visually impaired people in a live room, and what we generally had was a volunteer, totally blind, and we would have a volunteer sitting next to them describing what was on the slide, whispering in their ear. And I had, and they were doing that for all their classes, and I had a number of these volunteers come up to me afterwards and said, Rab, your slides were the easiest to work with, because I didn't put hundreds of words on the slide.
And then when the visually impaired individual listen to your lecture, actually they're listening, they're not reading from the slide, so that's easy for them. And
that's what everybody should be doing. Everybody should be listening to you, because that's why they're there. If they've came and you're going to give them something to read, why don't they just take that something and go to the pub and read it over a beer in more comfort? Give them the handout to read when you've finished the presentation. When you're presenting, your job is to have their attention. Your job is to give them the information. The slide's job is to help them remember the things that are coming out of your mouth. The slide's job isn't really to impart the information. That's your job to do that. So that's where people make a mistake, is they think the slide is a place to dump information. It's not. That's the handout you give people after your presentation is finished. That's the book or the article that you write about that. You don't give them all that stuff at the beginning, because they're going to read it and not listen to you, because most people are visually dominated learners.
All right, great tip. Thank you.
Yeah, the people who ask for a PowerPoint after missing the presentation, they're missing the point. And this is one of the good things that's came out of Zoom. By recording them, anyone who misses the presentation, we can just send them the video if they want to watch it. But, you know, to be honest, most people wouldn't, because who wants to watch a professor being boring, reading their notes? It's not so engaging. But if it's not recorded, you'd need to make a completely different slide deck with all the information on it. That's why I teach the 2 styles, the PSE for delivering live to make the stuff go in easy, and the Slidument one for giving the people who missed, who are not going to have the benefit of you being in the room. So, any last questions? We've still got 5 minutes before Charlie begins, but it would be nice to get everybody in on time. A last question?
If there are no more questions, I think everyone can unmute themselves and applaud.
One last quick thing, because I practice what I preach, and in presentations, you shouldn't end at the end of your questions, because that means the last thing people remember is the last question, and the last question was nobody having any questions, which is a bad thing to remember. If you build in a one last point, you increase your energy and volume and give them one super killer point to take away. It's right at the end, they'll remember it. And the one key point is, I only showed you one of my presentation slideshow design videos in my YouTube channel. There's about 14 or 15 of them, and my YouTube channel is free. It's open to everybody. You can just go in here, go to YouTube. The first thing you'll have to do is to shut me up.
Welcome to my...
Scroll down, and you can find the section on presentation skills and theory, and you can see that there's 15 mainly short videos there covering many different aspects of design. So that's your takeaway. One last thing, and with that, Now I'm done. And, you know, my email address is easy as well. If you've got any follow-on questions, it's just rab.paterson@gmail.com. I'm easy to find. If you do have any follow-up questions, just shoot me something. I feel like coming from Mars, I always have questions. I love it when people give me questions because that means they're actually thinking. So yeah, nice. On that note, we really should head back for Charlie, I guess.